I'm sure I'm not the only one of us out there who's read The Art of War before. I bet plenty of you have read it a number of times before watching any of my videos, and those of you well acquainted with it know that there's plenty of stuff, plenty of chapters that aren't going to directly relate to League. After all, it was written in a very different time, and of course for a very different purpose than what we're using it for, so you can't take every single sentence literally and make thousands of direct correlations with League of Legends. Well, this is one of those chapters. In Chapter 7, Sun Tzu talks a lot about the movement of an army, transporting a large force over great distances without losing weaker links. He talks a bit about keeping your army well supplied, and all sorts of things that don't necessarily relate to League, but there is a very important overlying theme. Have you ever had a game where your whole team just seemed a bit slow? For instance, the other team may be pushing down mid, taking the outer turret, and you aren't there to defend. By the time your team gets there, they've already rotated a bot, and now they're taking that tower. By the time your team gets bot, they've already taken the tower and are now doing dragon, and by the time you war dragon, they've already finished it and left. The enemy team always just seems 2 steps ahead of you, which makes you and your team seem a bit sluggish and sometimes almost stupid for being so behind. Well, that's what this chapter is about. Chapter 7 explores ideas about how to efficiently and effectively maneuver across the battlefield and keep up with your opponent. It's an important skill, especially if you're doing it with an actual army, and for some it may seem a bit difficult to master or understand, but there are some things that you can do if you often find yourself in situations like this. Firstly, you should always try to think like your opponents. If they're always a step ahead of you, guess what their next step will be. An obvious example being if it's 40 minutes into the game and most of your team is bottom, they'll probably be looking to do Baron. Try to apply the same basic way of thinking to the rest of the game and you should be able to guess their next move. If they just took mid and they have an AD carry farming bot and they all disappeared into your bottom jungle, chances are they're going bot to join him, take bot tower, maybe dragon, maybe steal your red or blue. It's all very situational, so you have to be the person to make the call of thinking what will they do next, but you can use your own knowledge to figure that out very effectively. Always try to think, if I were in their position, what would I do? If you do that, more often than not you'll be able to figure out what their next move will be. It doesn't take a genius to figure it out. After all, if you're playing ranked, you're in the same elo bracket, the same division, similar ratings. It's only natural that everyone there plays and thinks somewhat alike. It just takes a leader to make the calls, step up and get your team organized. Now keep in mind there are actually some other options you can do. If you're tied or if you're actually in the lead, you can try and base race them rather than, having everyone leave top to go try and defend mid. You can just push top, take their tower as they take yours. But you have to be careful about doing stuff like this. In the end, if you decide to trade 1 for 1, generally it's better to take objectives more towards the center of the map. Taking the middle towers or inhibitor is generally more important than taking top or bots. When you take the mid towers, the enemy loses much more vision, and if you take their mid inhib, they'll be pressured by super minions much more, since it's a lot faster for super minions to get down the mid lane rather than going all the way around top or bot. In the end though, this chapter is sort of what I may call an experience chapter. I can't necessarily tell you exactly what to do, sort of like last hitting. I can give you all sorts of tips and try and help you or help you to get better at it faster, but in the end, nothing will be a substitute for your experience. Actually feeling it and understanding how it works in-game is much more beneficial than hearing someone tell you how to deal with it. But think like your enemy, trade 1 for 1 if it's a good idea, and always try to just not fall too far behind. And you should minimize any sort of fast-paced snowballing movement that the enemy tries to start.